I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to the kitchen chair, she broke your throat and she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the
Headphones on.
Here we go. Hi, everybody. It's me, Wendy. I've got the Miss Junebug on the line.
Hello, everyone.
Ooh, hello.
And Merry Christmas. Happy Yule.
Merry Christmas. Yes, the whole bit.
Yay. Well, I hope everyone has had a wonderful day today if you celebrate Christmas. Or Yule, or what are the other things? Yes, yes. And Hanukkah started a few days ago.
and several other things that I probably couldn't pronounce, let alone remember. So, so there we are, right?
Right. Well, it's like I just hope everybody is happy no matter what they believe and what they celebrate.
That's right, by golly.
You know, and you're kind and nice, and that's the main thing.
Peace. May you find some peace. Yes.
Peace somewhere. Yes. And so I hope you have fun breaking away from your festivities to join us. It's going to be a little bit of a fun show. Unfortunately, I will not be able to stay long because I am at another place. I'm going to abandon Wendy.
I'm abandoned.
Yes, you should be abandoned, but you will make good use of it.
Of course I will. I've got all kinds of things in the well there to draw from today.
Exactly. But so
yeah.
I was going to say, so how's everything been going this last week with all your with the weather and everything else down in Kansas City?
It was right at 70 degrees today. Kind of hazy. Yes, exactly. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
So it's not a happy white Christmas, but
oh my gosh. Now that sounds amazing.
Yeah,
it's cold here.
Yes. Oh no.
Yes.
Kind of flip-flopped on us.
Frigid cold, yes.
I hate frigid cold.
And excuse me, everyone, I'm slurring just a little bit. I've had a little holiday cheer. So it's like, ooh, kind of hit me a little bit harder than I thought it would. It's like, a little bit stronger than I thought. So, but a little good Irish whiskey and bringing in the almost New Year, but
Yes, exactly. I've got a
away,
little of the Irish cream, so.
Ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah, the Costco
Bailey's
brand,
Irish cream.
The huge Bailey's bottle of Costco brand.
Yes, nice. That was one thing when I went to, especially Northern Ireland. It was so funny. Almost every single meal that we went to, it's like they were always trying to put some Bailey's Irish cream and stuff. So breakfast was the biggest thing because of oatmeal. And they're like, would you like a little Bailey's Irish cream on your oatmeal? And then there's the whiskey. And so I had, Irish coffee. It's like Bailey's in the oatmeal. And it was like almost every meal. I've never drank so much in my life. I was like, this is wild. Excuse me. But yeah, it was crazy.
Well, they do grow up on it, so it's like,
it's water to them.
Exactly.
It is so good. But I was just thinking that, going, oh, yes, I remember.
I remember well.
Yes. Oh, gosh. But it was so fun.
Being of strong Irish descent, I kind of, I understand.
Yes. I have the English, Irish, Scottish descent.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. Almost dang. The German, of course, as well. So.
Oh, yes.
A little bit of French, about an eighth French, I think.
So you have the German. So you have the Krampus gene.
Krampus. Well, yeah, I suppose so.
So now you have to even watch out more that you behave.
Ooh. Wouldn't he have already arrived?
Yeah, you think so. But maybe you've been good all this time. And he's just waiting for the chance. You've been good all these years, and now it's like...
all of these years, yes.
Yes. He's like, one day she'll slip up.
One day, and then I'll strike.
Right. Oh, my.
Her in the head with a sack full of coal.
We actually had a really fun event at Spooked in Seattle. We didn't even really have it at Spooked in Seattle. We had it at Merchants Cafe, which is not too far from Spooked in Seattle, in Pioneer Square. And it was really fun. We had Kim Douthit. She actually did a reading of different Christmas ghost stories, and not not a lot of Christmas ghost stories, but a lot of things about Krampus, basically.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And it was really fun. It was so she read, and we had Krampus there, and he, was kind of nodding his head and grunting a lot. But it was really cool. We had people, posing for pictures of Krampus and everything. So it was a great time and everything. So
awesome.
So yes, that was a lot of fun. But
I think I saw pictures. So that's
yes,
wonderful.
I'll have to post some of those pictures. It's like, oh my gosh, with Kim.
Definitely.
But,
so.
It was really fun. So
good.
But a lot of our investigations, we haven't had a lot of investigations this month yet. I think, so many people are busy with their families and everything. But
sure.
The first of the year, it's probably going to pick up a lot. So getting ready for that. So it should be fun. A lot of fun.
Rolling. Hey, what are we going to do next week? I don't have anything planned, or on the books, rather.
We will have to figure something out pretty quickly. If anybody has an idea of what you'd like us, to do, why don't you give us a call? Drop us a line. Mm-hmm. Send us a note and say, hey, I would love to hear blah, blah, blah. Or
exactly.
I'd love to be a guest on your show.
Exactly. Well, and go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say, because, we have all sorts of different topics, all sorts of different things. So, if you think you have a great topic, please feel free to call us. We've got some other guests lined up. We just need to put them in concrete. Well, Not really put them in concrete.
Well, no, not Kansas City style or anything.
No. we won't be Jimmy Hoffa style.
No.
If anybody has watched that movie on Netflix.
No, I heard enough about it before. It just really didn't interest me anymore.
Yeah, it's one of those movies that actually I started, and we're not endorsing it, as Jake would say. And Jake is doing his festivities too tonight, so that's why you're not hearing his lovely voice.
Yes, his dulcet tone.
Yes. But it was one of those movies. It was a little slow and everything, but I couldn't stop watching it. So it was just one of those movies that I was like, I'm really relaxed. I'm just sitting here watching it, and and you hear all about Jimmy Hoffa when I was young, and it was very enlightening. If what they say is true, basically.
Right? Yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I could definitely see it because at that time. But yeah, it was pretty cool.
I put a wreath up in my window with my little blue lights. Can you see that, June?
Looks very pretty.
Oh, thank you. I tried.
Very pretty.
My red bell wreath and my blue lights and my blue snowflake lights, and yeah.
So, Wendy, have you watched any Christmas movies lately, like within the past week, to really get you in the Christmas spirit?
Not particularly. I
was wondering.
Fred Claus, because it's one of my favorites.
Oh, yes.
And it was a white Christmas Bing Crosby marathon yesterday, so I went ahead and watched it a couple of times, actually. Or I listened to it as I was just, fiddling and doing other stuff.
Nice.
Mm-hmm. And didn't you go see the new Star Wars movie?
Star Wars, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was really horrible that everyone died. There was a big explosion, and then they were all gone. Damn.
Now, I did watch Endgame and Captain Marvel.
I love them.
Last week, and they were good. I mean, yeah, they were.
I love those.
Yeah,
I have to say, I am a Marvel girl. I do love the Marvel movies.
Yes.
I enjoyed the Justice League. I enjoyed Aquaman for obvious reasons. I
watched it because of the obvious reasons, the studly young Momoa, and
yes.
But the story and the CGI was just too much for me. It was like
a little bit.
Oh dear.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun.
Cool. Very cool.
It was, Nicole Kidman was, it was kind of fun.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing her in that kind of role. Usually you don't. But yeah, I enjoyed it. Like you said, though, some of it was a little like, whoa, very, very, a lot of much.
Yeah, yep.
But yeah, I do love all the Marvel movies. I don't think there's one that I don't like. One of my favorites, though, is Thor Ragnarok. I watched that over and over.
Now, that one, it was a lot of tongue-in-cheek. I liked it, but it wasn't my favorite.
It was a comedy for me.
It was.
It was like all a comedy. So it made me laugh a lot.
Ragnarok was really not supposed to be a comedy, but hey.
Yeah, I don't think it was. It was awesome. So, but I loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
And I loved, did you watch the little film afterwards with Jeff Goldblum when he ran away to Earth?
Yes, I did.
His new roommate.
Mm-hmm.
That was so funny.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my gosh, that was great.
Oh yeah, I always wait for the outtakes on there.
Yes, definitely. Mm-hmm. So
is that what they call that? The outtakes?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't.
Or deleted scenes, or just outtakes.
Okay.
So it wouldn't be deleted scene, but yeah, all of those.
That too, yeah.
Yes, but
even Deadpool was fun,
Oh yes,
mm-hmm.
That just made me laugh so hard. At the
I know,
end.
Yeah.
Which we won't give anything away, but if you haven't seen it by now, come on.
Oh yeah, exactly. Please.
But yeah, I love it. I think there's supposed to be another one. I think they're making another one too. So
interesting. Okay, I'm not sure where you could go from there, but alrighty.
I don't either. But it was really funny. So Ross is in here too.
Hi, Ross.
Wendy says hi.
Merry Christmas.
But yes, Merry Christmas, she says. Sorry, I have my headphones on.
Merry Christmas to Jerry Wolf, who's in our chat room. My friend Jerry. Now she...
I just got a message.
Jerry is getting together possibly a coven of witches show.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah, that'll be fun.
That would be fun.
Mm-hmm.
What would you talk about? A coven
witchcraft.
Okay.
We haven't decided yet. Yeah, we haven't decided yet.
They're like, yeah, June, witch stuff.
Witchy stuff.
Oh, that's awesome. But as we can have a segue into that too. It's like, since we're going to be talking about ghostly Christmas things tonight, and
old traditions.
Maybe Krampus.
Gothics. Mm-hmm.
Krampus,
him too.
Yes. But I found this really kind of cute poem I can read.
Okay,
if you'd like.
I would like.
If you'd like, hold on just a second. Let me get him up here.
You bet. Jerry says that we will talk about whatever we damn well please, and that's
Amen.
Right. Yes.
That's awesome. I love it.
Mm-hmm, definitely.
Okay, this is called I Krampus.
Ooh.
I'll say it like this, Krampus. I wish I could talk with a German accent. It would probably be a lot better, but I would just sound ridiculous. So I will read it as it's written.
Okay.
If I can read it, because it's very small print. Let me make it a little bigger because I'm old now.
Well, I printed mine out and made the font a lot larger in the document before I printed it out.
Yeah, very smart.
Mm-hmm.
Anything so slow. Okay, it says, I am the sun of the season. Hear the bitter wind scream my name. The moon of celebration, my eyes burn with winter's flame. Krampus, Krampus. What do you wish, little child? I give to you nothing, and I take everything. Born of these ancient traditions, deal punishment to the profane. Holiday of discretion, Krampus blessing and disdain. Krampus, Krampus. What do you wish, little child? I give you nothing, and take everything. Crimson eyes, blackened fur, devil horns. I, Krampus, talon hands, cloven hooves, season dread. I, Krampus. Have you been naughty? Have you been nice? It makes no difference. Existence in winter haunted snow globes. I am not Odin or Saint Nick, but will feast on the innocent. The chains of doom jingle like bells of damnation instruments. Krampus, Krampus. What do you wish, little child? I give to you nothing, and I take everything. Crimson eyes, blackened fur, devil horns. I, Krampus. Talon hands, cloven hooves, season dread. I, Krampus. That's the end.
Bravo.
Ooh. It's written by Hades Rising.
Okay, cool.
So I was thinking, I was like, was this a song? But it's just a haunting chant for Hades. Haunting chant, Hades Rising. So very cool.
Very, very cool. I liked it. Bravo, thank you.
Another one. You're welcome. I think there was another one. No, that was the one. Thought I saved it twice, I was going to say. But I do have a very interesting Seattle ghost story, if you would like to hear it.
Absolutely. Please do tell.
Before they are calling my name. It's like in the other room. But back in the turn of the century, Seattle, I don't know if you've heard the story about Seattle being built up about maybe 20 to 30 feet from the original, I guess you'd say, the original floor of Seattle. They had a lot of plumbing problems, everything out like that. And then on June 6, 1889, there was a horrible fire that destroyed, 36 city blocks in 12 hours. I mean, it just wiped out everything in 1889. So, anyway, when they rebuilt the city, they decided to build the city up to fix a lot of the plumbing problems, because when high tide came in and you were sitting on your crapper, as they used to call it, and high tide came in, you were shot off your crapper with 6 to 8 foot, geysers of salt water and sewage. Yes. So a lot
I'm sorry.
of
I guess that would not be good to, go through, but I can look back and laugh.
Yes.
The ultimate bidet.
Yes, exactly. So a lot of people had to check the tides in the paper. So they'd always list the tide times in the paper, and you don't want to be sitting on the toilet at that time, or you're just going to be, like I said, be blasted off. So they said, okay, in order to combat all our problems, we are going to build the streets up. And so all of the first floors are now going to be basically the basement. This was around Pioneer Square in Seattle. So after they built all this up, they filled the streets in. So they built all these walls around the streets. They filled the streets in with a lot of sawdust from the sawmill, which you know how well that would work as a street filler. And, even like dead animals and the parts of the mountain, that was around and everything that's not there anymore, because they basically leveled everything to fill in all the streets. So, after they filled the streets in with sawdust, they had enormous chuck holes. And when I say, like potholes, this was a chuck hole. This was sometimes, 8 feet by 15 feet, like 15 feet wide and 8 feet deep. They had one that it would fill with water, and basically kids would swim in it. Yeah.
Oh my.
And if your horse or, buggy, anything fell in it, you were basically, that was crap.
Yeah.
So it was really bad.
Sorry, so long be seeing you.
Yes. So this one little boy, though, he fell in it, didn't know how to swim, and drowned in the chuck hole. Well, while he was struggling and screaming, a lot of people didn't want to jump in to save him because he was poor, for one thing.
Oh,
and
man.
Yeah, exactly. And another thing is they didn't want to go in there because they didn't know what was in there. So, sadly, all these people stood around and watched this little boy drown. And,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was like a horrible, horrible traumatic incident. So finally somebody jumped in. The father, I think, actually was the one that jumped in and saved, his boy. And he was screaming at, how could you people do that? Basically, I curse all you people for letting my son drown and all this stuff. But Before I get to the ghost story of this part, let me tell you that the Seattle founders of the Seattle board decided to make it mandatory that all children learn how to swim. That was their solution to fixing the problem. All children, it was mandatory that they learn how to swim, and there was going to be a flotation device close to the chuck hole. Totally serious. Yeah. That was how they fixed the problem. Mm-hmm. Well, this happened actually on Christmas Day when this happened.
Oh, no.
So, yeah, on Christmas Day. So, it said that some people, while they're walking around Pioneer Square, will glance up and see a little boy shivering that has been just wet, from head to toe, shivering and looking, for his father to help him.
Oh.
And when they try to help him, he'll disappear in front of their eyes. So he's actually been seen several times, but it's mostly on December 25th around Pioneer Square that he is seen. So
wow.
So yeah, it's supposed to be one of those wonderful ghost stories. We have several ghosts in Pioneer Square, but he's supposed to be the Christmas ghost.
Oh, poor little feller.
So it's a wonderful thing. But but yes, that's my little contribution. But now I'm sad to say, I think I'm going to have to go back in there because I'm getting the stink eye.
Well, fine. Yeah, no, I understand. I'm glad you took the time. Thank you so much for coming on for a little bit anyway. Sure.
I'm sorry that I couldn't get on more. All the festivities.
That's all right.
So what are you going to be reading tonight? Are you going to be doing something exciting?
I actually recorded.
Ooh, nice. That's
yes,
cool.
Yes, and Jake kind of smoothed it out for me and put it to a little background sound. And
Well, Merry Christmas, everyone. Happy, if we don't, well, I guess we will talk on New Year's.
About something, yes.
Yes, exactly. We'll have to think of the coming New Year.
Yes, definitely.
Things like that. We'll
have some black-eyed peas and stuff.
Yeah. Well, cabbage, black-eyed peas, the whole deal. Mm-hmm. But yes, we will have to think about that.
Definitely. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, Merry Christmas, everyone. Check out a ghost.org and mysticmooncafe.com.
On the Mystic Moon Radio Network now.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yes, even more awesome.
Definitely.
So a whole new year of fun, new guests, and everything else coming up. So,
and we'll talk got more some about doozies. That too. Yes. Later in January, we've got the evil archaeology woman, and
I can't wait for that. That's going to be fun.
It is going to be very fun. Yes. And I believe our friend Cindy McKeon will be on with us. The astrology.
Oh.
Yeah, she said that she'd love to be on that show with us. It sounds like Jake's going to have a lot of travel coming, work travel and other type of travel coming up as well. So I made sure our bases were covered, and Cindy's always a good fill-in for us.
Awesome.
Yes, definitely.
Well, cool. Well, everyone have a lovely rest of your Christmas Eve or Christmas night.
Yes,
basically.
Go play with your toys. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm so spoiled.
Oh,
which I love. All right.
Well, thank you, June. Merry Christmas to you, and
Merry Christmas.
We'll talk soon.
Good night. Good night.
And it's just me now. I hope I'm still broadcasting. I think I should be, with any luck. Wouldn't that suck if I weren't? Anyway, yes, it still says I'm still broadcasting live. Well, okay, would you like to hear The Marriage of Cernunnos, which was written by Kyla Van Riper? Her grandmother had told her a story about it, and Kyla wrote it into a kind of a condensed form for tonight's show. I don't know that it's an actual ghost spooky story, but I do have several of those in the well as well. So I've got I recorded, believe it or not, my first recording reading, which was at the festival by H.G. No, not H.G. Wells. Lovecraft. H.P. Lovecraft. Yes. Thanks, Jerry. And Jacob did a short Krampus poem as well. And I picked up a couple of old spooky ones. I think one is by... let me check. I've got The Red Room by H.G. Wells. I did have one in H.G. Wells. The Spectre of Rislip Abbey, a ghost story, and by another Victorian writer, and The Phantom Coach. So, let me see. I think The Marriage of Sir Nonia's would be best to do. That's the order that it got downloaded, so might as well. So I'm going to put the recording on, and you all just sit back, listen, and let me see, I've got that on, I've got this on. Here we go.
The Marriage of Cernunnos, an inspired tale written by Kyla Van Riper. The old woman sat in a rocker by the bay window in her home. She felt old age catching up with her. Year after year, it seemed her corsets were getting loosened to keep her with breath in her body. Yet they remained just tight enough to hold what was left of her together. It was 1890, and there was all the hustle and bustle of the Christmas season in effect. Ever since Charles Dickens wrote his best-selling novel, A Christmas Carol, the world seemed forever changed at Christmas. Here at the hearth of the Yule log, at least some ancient traditions had not been lost to the passage of time. Time was something Anne felt all too keenly these days. She eyed her family, who appeared worn and weary this time of night. They had all feasted and danced, sung and made merry, played games, and opened presents. It had been such a long and wonderful day. "Children, we have one more tradition before it is time to bid you good night," Anne began. "I must tell you a tale of the old ways as was handed down by my mother." "Mother, are you feeling up to it?" Julie, Anne's daughter, asked with some concern. "Oh, yes, I am quite up for it." "Well, then let's hear the story. I have always loved when Grandmother would tell her stories," Julie reminisced. "And now I am the grandmother who must continue this tradition, at least for a time. To begin, this is a tale of the old gods, and in the days of my great-grandmother's youth, they would keep the old traditions alive by telling the stories of the old gods around the hearth, as fairy tales to keep the young ones entertained and spirits appeased." Anne began as she sat back, looking off into the distance, as though peering through time and space with a gleam in her eye and a smile on her lips. "You see, children, stretching many thousands of years ago, there was not one god, but many. The names of the gods have come and gone, but none was more important than the stag god, Cernunnos." "What do you mean, Grandmother? Did they not know our god?" Anne's children were by far wiser than she had ever been as a child, and she smiled and let a short giggle before continuing. "Back then, they believed there was a separate god or goddess that was responsible for all the things that happened in the land. Some gods controlled the weather, and others controlled luck or money. For our ancestors, Cernunnos was the most important god, for Cernunnos was the protector of the animals, of the forests, a symbol of fertility, who put the land to sleep every winter and seeded the plants for growth in the spring. Cernunnos was the giver of the seed of life, and he was also the one who transcended beyond the veil into shadow and led the souls of those who died to the great beyond. Though the gods were many, Cernunnos was lonely and wished for a wife. He did not wish for just any old wife. He wanted a wife fit for a god. But the goddesses were often vain, and he held them with contempt. He would look for a human wife, and in so doing he would make her a goddess. This is the story of the marriage of Cernunnos. Cernunnos wished for a wife who would love the animals just as much as he, and he wished for a wife who would give birth to the things he planted. He wished for a lover of the stars and the sky. He wished for a love beyond any love the world has ever known. He wished for a wife who was the other half of his soul. So Cernunnos set out to travel the world. He had first come to the land of the Indians, who worshipped him as the god of the hunt. For Cernunnos always wore his crown of antlers in the spring and summer. There he found a young maiden wearing buckskin. "Why do you wear the hide of the animal?" he asked. "We do not have fur and need something to keep our bodies warm when it is cold," was her answer. "What do you do with the rest of the animal?" he asked. "We eat the meat. We make things from the bones. We use the organs for medicine." Cernunnos seemed satisfied with her answers, for if the animals were hunted, it was done with purpose, and they never took more than what they needed. So Cernunnos wed the lovely woman and led her into the wood to make their bed. Cernunnos had one last question to ask her, one that burned deeply within him, for his curiosity had gotten the better of him. "Why did you not think to offer sacrifice or make offerings with your crops, since your kind has worshipped me?" Cernunnos asked of her. "We do not waste any animal. We do not waste food. An offering is a waste," the woman explained. Cernunnos became angry with her answer. Any god that would be worshipped demanded sacrifice. In the spring of that year, the tribe found her body at the edge of the village. The woman was barely recognized, as she had seemed to age decades beyond her years. The tribe did not understand what had displeased the gods and so they carried her body to their burial grounds and lay her with the earth. Later that night, they danced and worshipped the antlered god, but he ignored their cries and turned away to the south. As Cernunnos traveled, he came upon many places with many different people. All would worship him as a god, but none would make offerings or sacrifice to him. They viewed him as a lesser god and therefore not worthy of spilled blood or cut grain. And village after village, Cernunnos would wed in the fall, and the villagers would find the aged, disheveled body of his bride in the spring. Finally, the stag god came to rest on the island of Britannia. Word had spread of this traveler god with reindeer antlers, who was given many names in the native tongues of the lands he had visited. He liked the name Cernunnos and decided he would keep it. In the lands of Britannia, Cernunnos found that the villagers not only raised the animals needed to survive, but when they hunted, they would take only what they needed and did not waste even one drop of blood, even when they sacrificed. Cernunnos was so pleased, and he found the women so beautiful, that he decided he would take a wife in these lands. So Cernunnos found a beautiful maiden with long golden locks of hair. She had not yet been betrothed, and her parents urged her to become the wife of a god. She had made sacrifice to Cernunnos before the hunt and gained favor by enticing him with dance and food. Cernunnos wed her in the fall. "My love, bring forth the food and wine," he called to her at the banquet feast. But the woman did not budge. "Let the servants bring it," she sneered. "More food, more wine," he called out, and it was brought to the great hall where everyone ate and drank and danced. Cernunnos watched his bride with interest. She grew bored and yawned. "Shall we retire to our room?" he asked her. "I am quite tired," she answered her husband. They moved off into the room, which was adorned with leaf from the harvest and forest floor. They had covered the bed with moss and lace, and the room was really quite pleasing to the god. The woman looked at the room in disgust. "Is this to your liking?" Cernunnos asked. "I am not an animal, but I suppose since you are a god and half animal, that this would be to your liking." Cernunnos hung his head and half laughed. He shook his head and looked at her, smiling. Come, wife, do not be difficult. I can assure you that this is just for tonight, and I will make sure that you have accommodations that will suit you in the morning, he pleaded. Sleep there if you must, but tonight I will sleep here, on this stack of furs which is bound to be more comfortable than that patch of cold earth you call a bed. The smile faded from Cernunnos as his bride made herself comfortable in the furs and fell fast asleep. In the morning, Cernunnos carried the aged body of his bride out to the villagers. The woman's parents came screaming from the crowd. "What have you done? Why have you killed our daughter?" "I have searched the world over looking for a wife," he began softly. "I believe this woman loved me, but she did not love me. She wanted the title of godwife. You have beautiful wives and daughters, but in your hearts you are ugly." Cernunnos stepped forward. Gasps came from the crowd, and they backed out of his way. "I will return in 20 years, at the start of every new generation, looking for a wife. I will wed one of your daughters, and so help me if she displeases me in any way, the same thing will happen to her as what happened to this young girl here. I will take the remaining years of her life away until her life is forfeit. I will continue to do so until I find a wife among you who will be as beautiful on the inside as she is on the outside." With those words, Cernunnos left the village. The villagers cried out until he was gone. With their daughter dead and no other children to speak of, the couple left the village to seek a life elsewhere. Good to his word, Cernunnos returned every 20 years to the village seeking a wife. Every 20 years at the harvest feast, Cernunnos would find a bride awaiting him, marry her, and then in the spring her body would be found, aged almost beyond recognition. This continued for 500 years. The villagers had tried everything to groom the young women for the task at hand, and yet none of them were ever fit to be the bride of a god. One year, when the body of the stag god's latest attempt was found, there was a young couple who were expecting a child. The woman said, "If I am to bear a child, let it be a son. If I am to bear a daughter, let my daughter be ugly." To the woman's relief, her first child was a son. Her second child was also a son. Her third child, however, was a daughter, and she was devastated. The years began to pass, and the child began to grow. The parents of this child saw that as she grew, she was becoming very beautiful. One evening, the girl's mother began to weave some thick lace cloth, and worked late into the night and continued to do so for many nights after. The young girl was named Elena, and Elena's mother feared that word of the child's beauty would spread, so she devised a plan. Upon completion, Elena was given a veil to wear so no one would see her face. "Mother, why do I have to wear the veil?" Elena asked one night. "You must never allow anyone to look at your face. There is a deformity growing on you that might scare them, and so to keep them from harming you because of your deformity, you are to wear the veil and no one will ever know," her mother answered. As time went on, the girl Elena had eventually grown into a woman who could cook and clean and weave and sew. She was very talented making clothes for the women in the village. Elena had made several veils of her own, and none in the village had ever seen her face. Even her family did not know what she looked like without the veil. Soon the time had come for Cernunnos to return. While the villagers prepared for the feast, Elena sought refuge in the wood. Since she had donned the veil from the first, she never ate in front of others, as it was usually a bother to eat while she was wearing it. It was still light out, and she figured now would be as good a time as any to eat her evening meal. Little did she know Cernunnos was watching her, and he sent a fawn to her to see if she would stay uncovered. To the delight of Cernunnos, she turned to the fawn and offered a small piece of her bread, where he caught the slightest glimpse of her face. As soon as Elena finished her meal, she wiped clean her face, and then donned the veil and headed back into town. Elena had just made it just in time to start setting the great hall for the feast. A young girl whimpered into her mother's arms. Elena tried not to hear, but the voices of the young girl and her mother carried out to the hall. This was a woman Elena had known well, and her daughter was the chosen bride of the Cernunnos that year, and she was not very happy about it. It made Elena sad. All too soon, everyone was gathered in the village square. A goat was brought forth and offered as a sacrifice to the god. They offered up their prayers, and the goat was prepared for the feast. As the meat turned on the spit, refreshments were brought about, and everyone had moved into the great hall where a great banquet awaited them. Soon the meat of the goat was ready, and Cernunnos was pleased with all that he saw. Finally, the god entered the banquet hall, and the villagers cheered his arrival. They presented to him the young girl they had chosen. She stood with tears streaming down her cheeks. "Ah, my dear, are you afraid?" Cernunnos asked sadly. "No, Lord, tears of overwhelming happiness," answered the girl's mother. "I see," said Cernunnos. Then he spied Elena sitting under her veil, close to her parents, awaiting to serve any whose cup had gone dry. He brightened at the sight of her. "No, I think it is out of fear. I will not take her to be my wife." All the villagers gasped and grew silent. Had they just heard him correctly? He was not going to wed this beautiful maiden? They began to look at each other and whisper. What would they do? The women began to wail, and the men held tight their weapons, readying to attack the god. Cernunnos held up his hand, and the hall fell quiet once more. "I will not take her for my wife, but I will take a wife." As the god of nature, Cernunnos could be wild and unpredictable. That wildness in him crept up and poured out this night. Each of the villagers looked at each other, wondering who his bride would be. Cernunnos walked over to Elena. "What is your name?" "I am called Elena," she answered, but before the god could say any more, Elena's mother jumped from her seat and got between the god and her daughter. "No, you don't want her. She is ugly. She has a deformity on her face. You don't want her." But she shrieked, but Elena's father pulled her back, trying to quiet and comfort her. "We shall see," Cernunnos smiled. Elena walked forward and bowed her head before him. "Elena, why is it that you wear this veil?" "As my mother has already said, I wear this veil to a deformity on my face," she answered him plainly. "Are you married?" "No, Lord, the deformity prevents it," she answered. Murmurs and whispers rang through the hall. "I do not believe that you would be so deformed that you could not be wed to any man. Therefore, I will wed you, and you will find happiness." "Please do not be offended, but I am ugly, and I think there are others who are beautiful that would serve you better," Elena pleaded. "Elena, walk with me. Let us talk a bit." Cernunnos smiled at her, so Elena nodded and took his hand. They left the great hall and began to walk in the cool of the night air. They took the trail into the forest, and Cernunnos looked at his chosen one and said, "It wasn't too far from here that you were sitting taking your evening meal this very night, is it not?" "Yes, Lord." "You were not wearing your veil then?" "No, Lord." It then dawned on Elena that Cernunnos had not asked, but told her she was not wearing her veil. "You also fed a fawn from your own hand," he continued. "Yes, Lord." "Did you see me? Did you see me without my veil?" Through tears she asked, as she had never shown her face to anyone. "I did. I thought you were the most beautiful creature I had ever seen." With that, faster than lightning, Cernunnos lifted her veil. "My lord!" she breathed as she covered her face. "Lower your hands," the god commanded. Trembling, but she did so, but continued to try to turn away. Cernunnos took her hands in his, then ever so gently, he slid one hand up her arm to her face and gently turned her head towards him. "Please let me look in your eyes." Slowly she raised her gaze from the ground to meet his eyes. There, from under the dark mass of waves of hair that had fallen in her face, were the most stunning blue eyes that Cernunnos had ever seen, complemented by pale skin almost as white as snow. Looking through her eyes to her heart, Cernunnos knew he had finally found his bride. "I beg your forgiveness, Lord, for being so ugly," Elena began, but Cernunnos would have none of it. "You are very beautiful. Not just what I can see here," he said, touching her face, "but in here." He slowly let his hand drift from her face, down the nape of her neck to rest on her chest above her heart. You really don't find me ugly? She asked through her tears. No, it would please me greatly if you would be my bride, if you'll have me as your husband. Cernunnos smiled at her. Elena nodded her head in agreement, and Cernunnos pulled her into his arms. Tonight we will dance, we will sing, and we will be wed on the solstice. The pair returned to the great hall, and all who saw Elena were stunned by her beauty. None in the town recognized her, for none had ever seen her without her veil. Even Elena's mother did not immediately recognize her daughter, but when she did, she fell to the god's feet. Cernunnos, I understand that you wish to wed my daughter. Please have mercy on her and spare her from death, Elena's mother wept. Stand up, woman. You are the mother of a soon-to-be god-wife. My young bride will suffer no such fate. Elena's mother took his words to her heart, and though she felt some relief, she was still sure that in the spring Elena's body would be found like all the others. But she was wrong. After Elena married Cernunnos in the winter solstice, the couple then disappeared into the wood. They returned in the spring as Cernunnos had donned his antlers again, and this time something else was afoot. Elena, during their time beyond the veil, had kept watch over the herds of deer and other animals in their migrations. Upon seeing this, Cernunnos was very pleased. Elena had changed and become the antlered goddess of the wood. Cernunnos changed her name to Ellen, and the people called her Ellen of the Path. In the spring, Elena returned with a swollen belly. As the land awoke from its winter slumber, Ellen would walk the fields and give birth to the plants and life. Soon she bore her child, who would become a great leader of all the tribes of Britannia. It is from these tribes that our family is descended. Grandmother, what happened to Elena and Cernunnos? Her sleepy-eyed grandchildren asked. Like the rest of the gods, they passed into shadow as the one god took over. I like to think that they still wander the world and put the bed, the lands in the winter, and give birth to the fields and plants in the spring, Anne said. Well, now, children, it is time for bed. Tomorrow we have to plan for our New Year's celebration, Julie said, as she helped the youngsters to their room. I think I'll turn in too. Husband? Mother? Julie's husband, James, got up from his seat on the lounger, but Anne decided she wanted to sit by the fire just a little longer. After the young family had gone off to bed, Anne smirked to a darkened corner of the room and finally said, You can come out now. You always tell our story so very well, Cernunnos grinned. It always amazes me that you allow me to come back to the earth for a while, she answered. It was part of our arrangement, Cernunnos shrugged. I know, and yet you are still the wild man, god of the hunt, she mused. Come now, wife. Yes, it is time to come home. And in that moment, the old woman named Anne then became transformed into her true form, Ellen of the Path, who then took Cernunnos' hand and walked with him back into the shadow.
And the end. That was Kyla Van Riper. Thank you so much, Kyla. I don't see you in chat. I know you were feeling very poorly. But thank you for taking the time for writing your grandmother's story and sharing it with us. If you all are interested, she has the entire story, which is probably another 45 minutes, and it involves a lot of ghost stories, a lot of the ghostly in it. She said she would be happy to write that full thing out and maybe get it recorded for us. We've got some lively chats going in the chat room, and Jerry is providing some great witchy lore for good herbs and what am I looking for? Incense and things for heightened prosperity, well-being for the new coming year. Cindy McKean has joined us as well, and I believe the two are going to become a little more regular. They may even give us their voices on the shows. I know Cindy had said yes, now that she's over a rather grueling, or almost done with a rather grueling class she was taking. But there we go. All right, coming up next, I feel like a DJ on a real radio show, and this is Wendy with Mystic Moon Cafe, Mystic Moon Radio Network. We retook it over from Crimson Cloak, so there's that as well. So, how about a story from the incomparable H.G. Wells? It's read by a British person, so, the accent's right at least. And it's called The Red Room, a ghost story by H.G. Wells. Anyway, it's about 25 minutes. I couldn't find any shorter that I really liked, so I'll do that one, and then we'll hear from our co-host, Jacob Rice. Jake was having a lovely dinner with his significant other tonight, so he may join us in chat. One never knows about him. He's widely that way. Anyway, without further ado, The Red Room, a ghost story by H.G. Wells.
The Red Room by H.G. Wells. "I can assure you," said I, "that it will take a very tangible ghost to frighten me." And I stood up before the fire with my glass in my hand. "It is your own choosing," said the man with the withered arm, and glanced at me askance. 28 years, said I have lived, and never a ghost have I seen as yet." The old woman sat staring hard into the fire, her pale eyes wide open. "Aye," she broke in, "and 28 years you have lived, and never seen the likes of this house, I reckon. There's a many things to see, when one's still but 28. She swayed her head slowly from side to side. "A many things to see, and sorrow for." I half suspected the old people were trying to enhance the spiritual terrors of their house by their droning insistence. I put down my empty glass on the table and looked about the room, and caught a glimpse of myself, abbreviated and broadened to an impossible sturdiness, in the queer old mirror at the end of the room. "Well," I said, "if I see anything tonight, I shall be so much the wiser, for I come to the business with an open mind." "It's your own choosing," said the man with the withered arm once more. I heard the sound of a stick and a shambling step on the flags in the passage outside, and the door creaked on its hinges as a second old man entered, more bent, more wrinkled, more aged even than the first. He supported himself by a single crutch. His eyes were covered by a shade, and his lower lip, half averted, hung pale and pink from his decaying yellow teeth. He made straight for an armchair on the opposite side of the table, sat down clumsily, and began to cough. The man with the withered arm gave this newcomer a short glance of positive dislike. The old woman took no notice of his arrival, but remained with her eyes fixed steadily on the fire. "I said, it's your own choosing," said the man with the withered arm, when the coughing had ceased for a while. "It's my own choosing," I answered. The man with the shade became aware of my presence for the first time, and threw his head back for a moment and sideways to see me. I caught a momentary glimpse of his eyes, small and bright and inflamed. Then he began to cough and splutter again. "Why don't you drink?" said the man with the withered arm, pushing the beer towards him. The man with the shade poured out a glassful with a shaky hand that splashed half as much again on the deal table. A monstrous shadow of him crouched upon the wall and mocked his action as he poured and drank. I must confess I had scarce expected these grotesque custodians. There is, to my mind, something inhuman in senility, something crouching and atavistic. The human qualities seem to drop from old people insensibly day by day. The three of them made me feel uncomfortable, with their gaunt silences, their bent carriage, their evident unfriendliness to me and to one another. "If," said I, "you will show me to this haunted room of yours, I will make myself comfortable there." The old man with the cough jerked his head back so suddenly that it startled me, and shot another glance of his red eyes at me from under the shade. But no one answered me. I waited a minute, glancing from one to the other. "If," I said a little louder, "if you will show me to this haunted room of yours, I will relieve you from the task of entertaining me." "There's a candle on the slab outside the door," said the man with the withered arm, looking at my feet as he addressed me. "But if you go to the Red Room tonight—" "This night of all nights," said the old woman. "You go alone." "Very well," I answered. "And which way do I go?" "You go along the passage for a bit," said he, "until you come to a door, and through that is a spiral staircase, and halfway up that is a landing and another door covered with baize. Go through that, and down the long corridor to the end, and the Red Room is on your left up the steps." "Have I got that right?" I said, and repeated his directions. He corrected me in one particular. "And are you really going?" said the man with the shade, looking at me again for the third time, with that queer, unnatural tilting of the face. "This night of all nights," said the old woman. "It is what I came for," I said, and moved towards the door. As I did so, the old man with the shade rose and staggered round the table, so as to be closer to the others and to the fire. At the door I turned and looked at them, and saw they were all close together, dark against the firelight, staring at me over their shoulders, with an intent expression on their ancient faces. "Good night," I said, setting the door open. "It's your own choosing," said the man with the withered arm. I left the door wide open until the candle was well alight, and then I shut them in and walked down the chilly, echoing passage. I must confess that the oddness of these three old pensioners, in whose charge her ladyship had left the castle, and the deep-toned, old-fashioned furniture of the housekeeper's room in which they foregathered, affected me in spite of my efforts to keep myself at a matter-of-fact phase. They seemed to belong to another age, an older age, an age when things spiritual were different from this of ours, less certain, an age when omens and witches were credible, and ghosts beyond denying. Their very existence was spectral. The cut of their clothing, fashions born in dead brains. The ornaments and conveniences of the room about them were ghostly. The thoughts of vanished men, which still haunted rather than participated in the world of today. But with an effort I sent such thoughts to the right about. The long, draughty subterranean passage was chilly and dusty, and my candle flared and made the shadows cower and quiver. The echoes rang up and down the spiral staircase, and a shadow came sweeping up after me, and one fled before me into the darkness overhead. I came to the landing and stopped there for a moment, listening to a rustling that I fancied I heard. Then, satisfied of the absolute silence, I pushed open the baize-covered door and stood in the corridor. The effect was scarcely what I expected, for the moonlight, coming in by the great window on the grand staircase, picked out everything in vivid black shadow or silvery illumination. Everything was in its place. The house might have been deserted on the yesterday instead of 18 months ago. There were candles in the sockets of the sconces, and whatever dust had gathered on the carpets or upon the polished flooring was distributed so evenly as to be invisible in the moonlight. I was about to advance and stopped abruptly. A bronze group stood upon the landing, hidden from me by the corner of the wall, but its shadow fell with marvellous distinctness upon the white panelling, and gave me the impression of someone crouching to waylay me. I stood rigid for half a minute, perhaps. Then, with my hand in the pocket that held my revolver, I advanced, only to discover a Ganymede and eagle glistening in the moonlight. That incident for a time restored my nerve, and a porcelain Chinaman on a buhl table, whose head rocked silently as I passed him, scarcely startled me, The door to the Red Room and the stairs up to it were in a shadowy corner. I moved my candle from side to side in order to see clearly the nature of the recess in which I stood before opening the door. Here it was, thought I, that my predecessor was found, and the memory of that story gave me a sudden twinge of apprehension. I glanced over my shoulder at the Ganymede in the moonlight, and opened the door of the Red Room rather hastily, with my face half turned to the pallid silence of the landing. I entered, closing the door behind me at once, turned the key I found in the lock within, and stood with the candle held aloft, surveying the scene of my vigil, the great Red Room of Lorraine Castle, in which the young Duke had died, or rather, in which he had begun his dying, for he had opened the door and fallen headlong down the steps I had just ascended. That had been the end of his vigil, of his gallant attempt to conquer the ghostly tradition of the place, and never, I thought, had apoplexy better served the ends of superstition. And there were other and older stories that clung to the room, back to the half-credible beginning of it all, the tale of a timid wife, and the tragic end that came to her husband's jest of frightening her. And looking round that large, sombre room, with its shadowy window bays, its recesses and alcoves, one could well understand the legends that had sprouted in its black corners, its germinating darkness. My candle was a little tongue of light in its vastness, that failed to pierce the opposite end of the room, and left an ocean of mystery and suggestion beyond its island of light. I resolved to make a systematic examination of the place at once, and dispel the fanciful suggestions of its obscurity before they obtained a hold upon me. After satisfying myself of the fastening of the door, I began to walk about the room, peering round each article of furniture, tucking up the valances of the bed, and opening its curtains wide. I pulled up the blinds, and examined the fastenings of the several windows before closing the shutters, leant forward and looked up the blackness of the wide chimney, and tapped the dark oak panelling for any secret opening. There were 2 big mirrors in the room, each with a pair of sconces bearing candles, and on the mantel-shelf, too, were more candles in china candlesticks. All these I lit one after the other. The fire was laid, an unexpected consideration from the old housekeeper, and I lit it, to keep down any disposition to shiver. And when it was burning well, I stood round with my back to it, and regarded the room again. I had pulled up a chintz-covered armchair and a table to form a kind of barricade before me, and on this lay my revolver ready to hand. My precise examination had done me good, but I still found the remoter darkness of the place, and its perfect stillness, too stimulating for the imagination. The echoing of the stir and crackling of the fire was no sort of comfort to me. The shadow in the alcove at the end in particular had that undefinable quality of a presence, that odd suggestion of a lurking, living thing that comes so easily in silence and solitude. At last, to reassure myself, I walked with a candle into it and satisfied myself that there was nothing tangible there. I stood that candle upon the floor of the alcove and left it in that position. By this time I was in a state of considerable nervous tension, although to my reason there was no adequate cause for the condition. My mind, however, was perfectly clear. I postulated quite unreservedly that nothing supernatural could happen, and, to pass the time, I began to string some rhymes together, Ingoldsby fashion, of the original legend of the place. A few I spoke aloud, but the echoes were not pleasant. For the same reason I also abandoned, after a time, a conversation with myself upon the impossibility of ghosts and haunting. My mind reverted to the 3 old and distorted people downstairs, and I tried to keep it upon that topic. The sombre reds and blacks of the room troubled me. Even with 7 candles, the place was merely dim. The one in the alcove flared in a draught, and the fire flickering kept the shadows and penumbra perpetually shifting and stirring. Casting about for a remedy, I recalled the candles I had seen in the passage, and, with a slight effort, walked out into the moonlight, carrying a candle and leaving the door open, and presently returned with as many as 10. These I put in various knick-knacks of china, with which the room was sparsely adorned, lit and placed where the shadows had lain deepest, some on the floor, some in the window recesses, until at last my 17 candles were so arranged that not an inch of the room but had the direct light of at least one of them. It occurred to me that when the ghost came, I could warn him not to trip over them. The room was now quite brightly illuminated. There was something very cheery and reassuring in these little streaming flames, and snuffing them gave me an occupation, and afforded a helpful sense of the passage of time. Even with that, however, the brooding expectation of the vigil weighed heavily upon me. It was after midnight that the candle in the alcove suddenly went out, and the black shadow sprang back to its place there. I did not see the candle go out. I simply turned and saw that the darkness was there, as one might start and see the unexpected presence of a stranger. "By Jove," said I aloud, "that draught's a strong one." And, taking the matches from the table, I walked across the room in a leisurely manner to relight the corner again. My first match would not strike, and as I succeeded with the second, something seemed to blink on the wall before me. I turned my head involuntarily and saw that the 2 candles on the little table by the fireplace were extinguished. I rose at once to my feet. "Odd," I said. "Did I do that myself in a flash of absent-mindedness?" I walked back, relit one, and as I did so, I saw the candle in the right sconce of one of the mirrors wink and go out, and almost immediately its companion followed it. There was no mistake about it. The flame vanished, as if the wicks had been suddenly nipped between a finger and a thumb, leaving the wick neither glowing nor smoking, but black. While I stood gaping, the candle at the foot of the bed went out, and the shadows seemed to take another step towards me. "This won't do," said I, and first one and then another candle on the mantel-shelf followed. "What's up?" I cried, with a queer high note getting into my voice somehow. At that, the candle on the wardrobe went out, and the one I had relit in the alcove followed. "Steady on," I said. "These candles are wanted," speaking with a half-hysterical facetiousness, and scratching away at a match the while for the mantel candlesticks. My hands trembled so much that twice I missed the rough paper of the matchbox. As the mantel emerged from darkness again, 2 candles in the remoter end of the window were eclipsed. But with the same match I also relit the larger mirror candles and those on the floor near the doorway, so that for the moment I seemed to gain on the extinctions. But then, in a volley, there vanished 4 lights at once in different corners of the room. And I struck another match in quivering haste, and stood hesitating whither to take it. As I stood undecided, an invisible hand seemed to sweep out the 2 candles on the table. With a cry of terror, I dashed at the alcove, then into the corner, and then into the window, relighting 3, as 2 more vanished by the fireplace. Then, perceiving a better way, I dropped the matches on the iron-bound deed-box in the corner, and caught up the bedroom candlestick. With this I avoided the delay of striking matches. But for all that the steady process of extinction went on, and the shadows I feared and fought against returned, and crept in upon me, first a step gained on this side of me, and then on that. It was like a ragged storm cloud sweeping out the stars. Now and then one returned for a minute and was lost again. I was now almost frantic with the horror of the coming darkness, and my self-possession deserted me. I leapt, panting and dishevelled, from candle to candle, in a vain struggle against that remorseless advance. I bruised myself on the thigh against a table. I sent a chair headlong. I stumbled and fell and whisked the cloth from the table in my fall. My candle rolled away from me, and I snatched another as I rose. Abruptly, this was blown out, as I swung it off the table by the wind of my sudden movement, and immediately the 2 remaining candles followed. But there was light still in the room, a red light that staved off the shadows from me. The fire! Of course! I could still thrust my candle between the bars and relight it. I turned to where the flames were still dancing between the glowing coals and splashing red reflections upon the furniture, made 2 steps towards the grate, and incontinently the flames dwindled and vanished. The glow vanished. The reflections rushed together and vanished, and as I thrust the candle between the bars, darkness closed upon me, like the shutting of an eye, wrapped about me in a stifling embrace, sealed my vision, and crushed the last vestiges of reason from my brain. The candle fell from my hand. I flung out my arms in a vain effort to thrust that ponderous blackness away from me, and, lifting up my voice, screamed with all my might. Once, twice, thrice. Then I think I must have staggered to my feet. I know I thought suddenly of the moonlit corridor, and, with my head bowed and my arms over my face, made a run for the door. But I had forgotten the exact position of the door, and struck myself heavily against the corner of the bed. I staggered back, turned, and was either struck or struck myself against some other bulky furniture. I have a vague memory of battering myself thus, to and fro in the darkness, of a cramped struggle, and of my own wild crying, as I darted to and fro, of a heavy blow at last upon my forehead, a horrible sensation of falling that lasted an age, of my last frantic effort to keep my footing, and then I remember no more. I opened my eyes in daylight. My head was roughly bandaged, and the man with the withered arm was watching my face. I looked about me, trying to remember what had happened, and for a space I could not recollect. I rolled my eyes into the corner, and saw the old woman, no longer abstracted, pouring out some drops of medicine from a little blue phial into a glass. "Where am I?" I asked. "I seem to remember you, and yet I cannot remember who you are." They told me then, and I heard of the haunted Red Room as one who hears a tale. "We found you at dawn," said he, "and there was blood on your forehead and lips." It was very slowly that I recovered my memory of my experience. "You believe now," said the old man, "that the room is haunted?" He spoke no longer as one who greets an intruder, but as one who grieves for a broken friend. "Yes," said I, "the room is haunted. And you have seen it, and we who have lived here all our lives have never set eyes upon it, because we have never dared. Tell us, is it truly the old Earl who—" "No," said I, "it is not." "I told you so," said the old lady, with the glass in her hand. "It is his poor young countess, who was frightened at—" "It is not," I said. "There is neither ghost of Earl nor ghost of Countess in that room. There is no ghost there at all, but worse, far worse." "Well," they said. "The worst of all the things that haunt poor mortal man," said I, "and that is, in all its nakedness, fear. Fear that will not have light nor sound, that will not bear with reason, that deafens and darkens and overwhelms. It followed me through the corridor. It fought against me in the room." I stopped abruptly. There was an interval of silence. My hand went up to my bandages. Then the man with the shade sighed and spoke. "That is it," said he. "I knew that was it. A power of darkness, to put such a curse upon a woman. It lurks there always. You can feel it even in the daytime, even of a bright summer's day, in the hangings and the curtains, keeping behind you however you face about. In the dusk it creeps along the corridor and follows you, so that you dare not turn. There is fear in that room of hers, black fear. And there will be, so long as this house of sin endures."
And that was The Red Room by H.G. Wells, a ghost story. The Red Room was first published in the March 1896 edition of the Idler magazine. So, a little Victorian ghost story for well, actually, it's a pretty warm Christmas day, Christmas night. Anyway, onwards and upwards. I was thinking perhaps I would play the Krampus poem from our own Jake Rice. He recorded that earlier. It's pretty short. It's just 3 minutes and 55 seconds. So I'll play that real quick, and perhaps then I will go on to my own recording of The Festival by H.P. Lovecraft. So we've got a lot of H's going on tonight. Here is the Krampus poem by Jake.
Hey gang, you've got Jake here from Mystic Moon Cafe, as well as Ghostly Activities. And this evening's story is a poem. It's from Hello Poetry. It's about Krampus, and it's written by Jameson Bell. He recorded it, I believe, in November 2017. And with that, we will get started with the poem. It came upon a Christmas Eve, not so long ago. A beast deformed in stature walked out from the snow. Its eyes were sharp and wild, jagged teeth like shards. It went from house to house, leaving hoofprints in the yards. Glancing into windows warm with light and life, it was here to reconcile an old and bitter strife. It had a bag that screamed and cried as it dragged it on the ground. An awful thing, just an awful thing, to have to hear that sound. It threw its nose into the air and began to sniff and snort. This demon was onto something, but what, I can't report. In the bitter cold, you could smell its breath of rot and discontent. The chains that draped its frame made its spine look broke and bent. The wind it howled in vain to warn the people of this beast. Its cries went unregarded as people sat before their feast. The demon ceased its searching when it came upon my house. I did my best to hide and stay as quiet as a mouse. I walked back into the shadows in the corner of my room, voiceless, breathless, terrified. What was this thing of gloom? I heard it leap onto the deck and drop its sack upon the floor. A resounding thud caked in mud. It wasn't crying anymore. I left my room and crept down the stairs to see if it got in, hoping it wasn't that demon who they said would eat my skin. It stood before the fireplace. The front door was opened wide. I don't know how this thing got in, but I had nowhere left to hide. It turned its face from the fire with a scowl you'd have to see. The demon had a quarrel, and that quarrel was with me. It pulled out from the pocket of its robe all black and charred a burning piece of paper, then handed me its card. The card read only Krampus before I felt its claws upon my throat. Now I'm in a bag with other kids, set for some other place remote. We were bad and we didn't listen to our parents and their orders. We broke a lot of rules and disrespected borders. Now old Krampus has us, and he'll probably sell us off as food. This is what you get if you're whiny, mean, or rude. Now have a Merry Christmas and do as you've been told, lest you wind up in a demon's bag, being dragged upon the road.
And bravo, Jacob. Did a marvelous job with that, young man. Goodness. Got shivers. Shiver me timbers. It wouldn't have been even as creepy without that perfect music to go in the background. But anyway, meanwhile, on... You know what? I'm going to play one of my more favorite Christmas songs first. It takes a few minutes, but golly, it's Christmas Day. Why not the day of Christmas Day? So let's be merry, shall we? It's The Prayer by Celine Dion and Andrea Bocelli. Here we go.
And watch us where we go, and help us to be wise in times when we don't know. Let this be our prayer when we lose our way. Lead us to a place, guide us with your grace, to a place where we'll be safe.
La luce che tu dai,
I pray we'll find your light
nel cuore resterà,
and hold it in our heart.
Ricordarci che
When stars go out each night,
l'eterna stella sei nella mia preghiera.
let this be our prayer.
Quanta fede c'è,
When shadows fill our day,
lead us to a place,
guide us with your grace. Give us faith so we'll be safe.
sogniamo un mondo senza più violenza, un mondo di giustizia e di speranza. Ognuno di una mano al suo vicino si as fate so will be said. E la fede che hai acceso in noi, sento che ci salverà.
Yep, guilty pleasure, one of my favorites. Yeah, I do like opera, so there. Neener, neener. Anyway, back to our ghostly stories. I suppose it's about time for me to queue up. Let me see, where did it go? My own story that I picked. It's called The Festival, and it was written by H.P. Lovecraft. It was written in October of 1923 and published in the January 1925 issue of Weird Tales. It was fun to read. I'm going to beg your forgiveness for my butchering of some of those names, because they were just honestly just a whole bunch of letters put together trying to make us all trip up. And the Latin, no, I didn't even attempt it. So, anyway, here is my own version of The Festival. The Festival by H.P. Lovecraft. Devils so work that things which are not appear to men as if they were real. I was far from home, and the spell of the eastern sea was upon me. In the twilight I heard it pounding on the rocks, and I knew it lay just over the hill where the twisting willows writhed against the clearing sky and the first stars of evening. And because my fathers had called me to the old town beyond, I pushed on through the shallow, new-fallen snow along the road that soared lonely up to where Aldebaran twinkled among the trees, on toward the very ancient town I had never seen but often dreamed of. It was the Yuletide, that men call Christmas, though they know in their hearts it is older than Bethlehem and Babylon, older than Memphis and mankind. It was the Yuletide, and I had come at last to the ancient sea town where my people had dwelt and kept festival in the elder time, when festival was forbidden, where also they had commanded their sons to keep festival once every century, and that memory of primal secrets might not be forgotten. Mine were an old people, and they were old even when this land was settled 300 years before, and they were strange, because they had come as dark, furtive folk from opiate southern gardens of orchids, and spoken another tongue before they learnt the tongue of the blue-eyed fishers. And now they were scattered, and shared only the rituals of the mysteries that none living could understand. I was the only one who came back that night to the old fishing town, as legend bade, for only the poor and the lonely remember. Then, beyond the hill's crest, I saw Kingsport outspread frostily in the gloaming, snowy Kingsport, with its ancient vanes and steeples, ridgepoles and chimney pots, wharves and small bridges, willow trees and graveyards, endless labyrinth of steep, narrow, crooked streets, and ditzy church-crowned central peak that time durst not touch. Ceaseless mazes of colonial houses piled and scattered at all angles and levels like a child of disordered blocks. Antiquity hovering on gray wings over winter-whitened gables and gambrel roofs. Fanlights and small-paned windows, one by one, gleaming out in the cold dusk to join Orion in the archaic stars. And again the rotting wharves the sea pounded, the secretive, immemorial sea out of which the people had come in the elder time. Beside the road at its crest, a still higher summit rose, bleak and windswept, and I saw that it was a burying ground where black gravestones stuck ghoulishly through the snow like the decayed fingernails of a gigantic corpse. The printless road was very lonely, and sometimes I thought I heard a distant, horrible creaking as of a gibbet in the wind. They had hanged 4 kinsmen of mine for witchcraft in 1692, but I did not know just where. As the road wound down the seaward slope, I listened for the merry sounds of a village at evening, but did not hear them. Then I thought of the season and felt that these old Puritan folk might well have Christmas customs strange to me and full of silent hearthside prayer. So after I did not listen for merriment or look for wayfarers, kept on down past the hushed, lighted farmhouses and shadowy stone walls to where the signs of ancient shops and sea taverns creaked in the salt breeze, and the grotesque knockers of pillared doorways glistened along deserted, unpaved lanes in the light of little curtained windows. I had seen maps of the town and knew where to find the home of my people. It was told that I should be known and welcomed, for village legend lives long. So I hastened through Back Street to Circle Court and across the fresh snow on the one full flagstone pavement in the town to where Green Lane leads off behind the market house. The old map still held good, and I had no trouble, though at Arkham they must have lied when they said that trolleys ran to this place, since I saw not a wire overhead. Snow would have hid the rails in any case. I was glad I had chosen to walk, for the white village had seemed very beautiful from the hill, and now I was eager to knock at the door of my people, and the 7th house on the left in Green Lane, with an ancient peaked roof and jutting second story, all built before 1650. There were lights inside the house when I came upon it, and I saw from the diamond window panes that it must have been kept very close to its antique state. The upper part overhung the narrow, grass-grown street and nearly met the overhanging part of the house opposite, so that I was almost in a tunnel, with the low stone doorstep wholly free from snow. There was no sidewalk, but many houses had high doors reached by double flights of steps with iron railings. It was an odd scene, and because I was strange to New England, I had never known its like before. Though it pleased me, I would have relished it better if there had been footprints in the snow and people in the streets, and a few windows without drawn curtains. When I sounded the archaic iron knocker, I was half afraid. Some fear had been gathering in me, perhaps because of the strangeness of my heritage, and the bleakness of the evening, and the queerness of the silence in that aged town of curious customs. And when my knock was answered, I was fully afraid, because I had not heard any footsteps before the door creaked open. But I was not afraid long, for the gowned, slippered old man in the doorway had a bland face that reassured me, and though he made signs that he was dumb, he wrote a quaint and ancient welcome with a stylus and wax tablet he carried. He beckoned me into a low, candlelit room with massive exposed rafters and dark, stiff, sparse furniture of the 17th century. The past was vivid there, for not an attribute was missing. There was a cavernous fireplace and a spinning wheel at which a bent old woman in loose wrapper and deep-poked bonnet sat back toward me, silently spinning despite the festive season. An indefinite dampness seemed upon the place, and I marveled that no fire should be blazing. The high-backed settle faced the row of curtained windows at the left, and seemed to be occupied, though I was not sure. I did not like everything about what I saw, and I felt again the fear I had had. This fear grew stronger from what I had before lessened it, for the more I looked at the old man's bland face, the more its very blandness terrified me. The eyes never moved, and the skin was too much like wax. Finally, I was sure it was not a face at all, but a fiendishly cunning mask. But the flabby hands, curiously gloved, wrote genially on the tablet and told me I must wait a while before I could be led to the place of the festival. Pointing to a chair, table, and pile of books, the old man now left the room, and when I sat down to read, I saw that the books were hoary and moldy, and that they included old Morrister's Wild Marvels of Science, the terrible Sadecusmus Triumphatus of Joseph Glanville, published in 1681, the shocking Demonolatria of Remigius, printed in 1595 at Lyons, and worst of all, the unmentionable Necronomicon of the mad Arab Abdul al-Zirad, and Olaus Wormius' forbidden Latin translation, a book which I had never seen, but of which I had heard monstrous things whispered. No one spoke to me, but I could hear the creaking of signs in the wind outside, and the whir of the wheel as the bonneted old woman continued her silent spinning. I thought the room and the books and the people very morbid and disquieting, but because an old tradition of my father's had summoned me to the strange feastings, I resolved to expect queer things. So I tried to read, and soon became tremblingly absorbed by something I found in that accursed Necronomicon, a thought and a legend too hideous for sanity or consciousness. but I disliked it when I fancied I heard the closing of one of the windows that the settle faced, as if it had been stealthily opened. And it had seemed to follow a whirring that was not of the old woman's spinning wheel. This was not much, though, for the old woman was spinning very hard, and the age clock had been striking. After that, I lost the feeling that there were persons on the settle, and was reading intently and shudderingly when the old man came back, booted and dressed in a loose, antique costume, and sat down on that very bench, so that I could not see him. It was certainly nervous waiting, and the blasphemous book in my hands made it doubly so. When 11 struck, however, the old man stood up, glided to a massive carved chest in the corner, and got 2 hooded cloaks, one of which he donned, and the other of which he draped round the old woman, who was ceasing her monotonous spinning. Then they both started for the outer door, the woman lamely creeping, and the old man, after picking up the very book I had been reading, beckoning me as he drew his hood over that unmoving face or mask. We went out into the moonless and tortuous network of that incredibly ancient town, went out as the lights in the curtained windows disappeared one by one, and the dog-star leered at the throng of cowled, cloaked figures that poured silently from every doorway and formed monstrous processions up this street and that, past the creaking signs and antediluvian gables, the thatched roofs and the diamond-paned windows, threading precipitous lanes where decaying houses overlapped and crumbled together, gliding across open courts and churchyards where the bobbing lanterns made eldritch drunken constellations. And amid these hushed throngs, I followed my voiceless guides, jostled by elbows that seemed preternaturally soft, and pressed by chests and stomachs that seemed abnormally pulpy, but never seeing a face and hearing never a word. Up, up, up the eerie columns slithered, and I saw that all the travelers were converging as they flowed near a sort of focus of crazy alleys at the top of a high hill in the center of the town, where perched a great white church. I had seen it from the road's crest when I looked at Kingsport in the new dusk, and it had made me shiver, because Aldebaran had seemed to balance itself a moment on that ghostly spire. There was an open space around the church, partly a churchyard with spectral shafts, and partly a half-paved square swept nearly bare of the snow by the wind, and lined with unwholesomely archaic houses having peaked roofs and overhanging gables. Death fires danced over the tombs, revealing gruesome vistas, though queerly failing to cast any shadows. Past the churchyard, where there were no houses, I could see over the hill's summit, and watch the glimmer of stars on the harbor, though the town was invisible in the dark. Only once in a while a lantern bobbed horribly through serpentine alleys on its way to overtake the throng that was now slipping speechlessly into the church. I waited till the crowd had oozed into the black doorway, and till all the stragglers had followed. The old man was pulling at my sleeve, but I was determined to be the last. Crossing the threshold into the swarming temple of unknown darkness, I turned once to look at the outside world as the churchyard phosphorescence cast a sickly glow on the hilltop pavement, and as I did so I shuddered, for though the wind had not left much snow, a few patches did remain on the path near the door, and in that fleeting backward look it seemed to my troubled eyes that they bore no mark of passing feet, not even mine. For though the wind had not left much snow, a few patches did remain on the path near the door, and in that fleeting backward look it seemed to my troubled eyes that they bore no mark even from my own feet. The church was scarce lighted by the lanterns that had entered it, for most of the throng had already vanished. They streamed up the aisle between the high pews to the trap door of the vaults, which yawned loathsomely open just before the pulpit, and were now squirming noiselessly in. I followed dumbly down the foot-worn steps and into the dark, suffocating crypt. The tale of that sinuous line of night marchers seemed very horrible, and as I saw them wriggling into a venerable tomb, they seemed more horrible still. Then I noticed that the tomb's floor had an aperture down which the throng was sliding, and in a moment we were all descending an ominous staircase of rough-hewn stone. A narrow spiral staircase, damp and peculiarly weirdly odorous, that wound endlessly down into the bowels of the hill past monotonous walls of dripping stone blocks and crumbling mortar. It was a silent, shocking descent, and I observed after a horrible interval that the walls and steps were changing in nature, as if chiseled out of the solid rock. What mainly troubled me was that the myriad footfalls made no sound and set up no echoes. After more eons of descent, I saw some side passages or burrows leading from unknown recesses of blackness to the shaft of nighted mystery. Soon they became excessively numerous, like impious catacombs of nameless menace, and their pungent odor of decay grew quite unbearable. I knew we must have passed down through the mountain and beneath the earth of Kingsport itself, and I shivered that a town should be so aged and maggoty with its subterraneous evil. Then I saw the lurid shimmering of pale light, and heard the insidious lapping of sunless waters. Again I shivered, for I did not like the things that the night had brought, and wished bitterly that no forefather had summoned me to this primal rite. As the steps in the passage grew broader, I heard another sound, the thin, whining mockery of a feeble flute, and suddenly there spread out before me the boundless vista of an inner world, a vast fungous shore lit by a belching column of sick, greenish flame and washed by a wide, oily river that flowed from abysses frightful and unsuspected to join the blackest gulfs of immemorial ocean. Fainting and gasping, I looked at that unhallowed Erebus of Titan toadstools, leprous fire and slimy water, and saw the cloaked throngs forming a semicircle around the blazing pillar. It was the Yule rite, older than man and fated to survive him, the primal rite of the solstice and of spring's promise beyond the snows, the rite of fire and evergreen, light and music. And in the Stygian grotto I saw them do the rite, and adore the sick pillar of flame, and throw into the water handfuls of gouged-out viscous vegetation, which glittered green in the chlorotic glare. I saw this, and I saw something amorphously squatted far away from the light, piping noisomely on a flute, and as the thing piped I thought I heard noxious muffled flutterings in the fetid darkness where I could not see. But what frightened me the most was that flaming column, spouting volcanically from depths profound and inconceivable, casting no shadows as healthy flame should, and coating the nitrous stone with nasty, venomous verdigris. For all that seething combustion, no warmth lay, but only the clamminess of death and corruption. The man who had brought me now squirmed to a point directly beside the hideous flame, and made stiff ceremonial motions to the semicircle he faced. At certain stages of the ritual, they did groveling obeisance, especially when he held above his head that abhorrent Necronomicon he had taken with him, and I shared all the obeisances, because I had been summoned to this festival by the writings of my forefathers. Then the old man made a signal to the half-seen flute player in the darkness, which player thereupon changed its feeble drone to a scarce louder drone in another key, precipitating as it did so a horror unthinkable and unexpected. At this horror I sank nearly to the lichened earth, transfixed with a dread not of this or any world, but only of the mad spaces between the stars. Out of the unimaginable blackness beyond the gangrenous glare of that cold flame, out of the Tartarian leagues through which that oily river rolled uncannily, unheard and unsuspected, there flopped rhythmically a horde of tame, trained, hybrid winged things that no sound eye could ever wholly grasp, or sound brain ever wholly remember. They were not altogether crows, nor moles, nor buzzards, nor ants, nor vampire bats, nor decomposed human beings, but something I cannot and must not recall. They flopped limply along, half with their webbed feet and half with their membranous wings, and as they reached the throng of celebrants, the cowled figures seized and mounted them, and rode off one by one along the reaches of that unlighted river, into pits and galleries of panic where poison springs feed frightful and undiscoverable cataracts. The old spinning woman had gone with the throng, and the old man remained only because I had refused when he motioned me to seize an animal and ride like the rest. And I saw when I staggered to my feet that the amorphous flute player had rolled out of sight, but that two of the beasts were patiently standing by. As I hung back, the old man produced his stylus and tablet, and wrote that he was the true deputy of my fathers, who had founded the Yule worship in this ancient place, that it had been decreed I should come back, and that the most secret mysteries were yet to be performed. He wrote this in a very ancient hand, and when I still hesitated, he pulled from his loose robe a seal ring and a watch, both with my family arms, to prove that he was what he said. But it was a hideous proof, because I knew from old papers that the watch had been buried with my great-great-great-great-grandfather in 1698. Presently, the old man drew back his hood and pointed to the family resemblance in his face, but I only shuddered, because I was sure that the face was merely a devilish waxen mask. The flopping animals were now scratching restlessly at the lichens, and I saw that the old man was nearly as restless himself. When one of the things began to waddle and edge away, he turned quickly to stop it, so that the suddenness of his motion dislodged the waxen mask from what should have been his head. And then, because that nightmare's position barred me from the stone staircase down which we had come, I flung myself into the oily underground river that bubbled somewhere to the caves of the sea, flung myself into that putrescent juice of earth's inner horrors, before the madness of my screams could bring down upon me all the carnal legions these pest gulfs might conceal. At the hospital, they told me I'd been found half frozen in Kingsport Harbor at dawn, clinging to the drifting spar that accident sent to save me. They told me I had taken the wrong fork of the hill road the night before and fallen over the cliffs at Orange Point, a thing they deduced from prints found in the snow. There was nothing I could say, because everything was wrong. Everything was wrong, with the broad windows showing the sea of roofs in which only about 1 in 5 was ancient, and the sound of trolleys and motors in the streets below. They insisted that this was Kingsport, and I could not deny it. When I went delirious at hearing that the hospital stood near the old churchyard in Central Hill, they sent me to St. Mary's Hospital at Arkham, where I could have better care. I liked it there, for the doctors were broad-minded, and even lent me their influence in obtaining the carefully sheltered copy of Alzarad's objectionable Necronomicon from the library of Miskatonic University. They said something about a psychosis, and agreed I had better get any harassing obsessions off my mind. So I read the hideous chapter, and shuddered doubly because it was indeed not new to me. I had seen it before. Let footprints tell what they might, and where it was I had seen it were best forgotten. There was no one, in waking hours, who could remind me of it, but my dreams are filled with terror, and because of phrases I dare not quote, I dare quote only one paragraph, put into such English as I can make from the awkward low Latin. The nethermost caverns, wrote the mad Arab, are not for the fathoming of eyes that see, for their marvels are strange and terrific. Curse the ground where dead thoughts live new and oddly bodied, and evil the mind that is held by no head. Wisely did Ibn Shikabal say that happy is the tomb where no wizard hath lain, and happy the town at night whose wizards are all ashes. For it is of old rumor that the soul of the devil bought haste not from his carnal clay, but fats, and instructs the very worm that gnaws. Let me do this bit just a tad again. For it is of old rumor that the soul of the devil bought haste not from his carnal clay, but fats and instructs the very worm that gnaws, till out of corruption horrid life springs, and the dull scavengers of earth wax crafty to vex it, and swell monstrous to plague it. Great holes secretly are digged where earth's pores ought to suffice, and things have learnt to walk that ought to crawl. The end. Thank you for listening to my ramblings. All right, and that was me. Yep, I went pretty fast, and those names were just a booger. I dropped a link to the original, or one of the original manuscripts of this short story by H.P. Lovecraft in the chat room. So you can see for yourself and tell me how horribly I mangled those names. and I just completely skipped the Latin because it was close enough as it was. Thank you, Jerry. Thank you very much. Anyway, we're awfully close to the end of the show, so unless there's some other business, I will probably just take us out of here with another song, as you know I like to do. Oh heck, I'll just play Pentatonic's Hallelujah again as we go out. But thank you, Jerry. Thank you, Cindy, for joining in the chat room. Thanks to June. for joining me on the call at the very beginning of the show. I want to thank Kyla Van Riper for submitting her wonderful Sir Nunya's story. And thanks to Jake Rice for giving us the Krampus poem. And, golly, seems like it's been an awfully long weekend, and it's just really not over yet. So, without further... okay, next week, yeah, I don't know what we're going to be doing, but we will probably have a show. I'm just not positive what it's going to be about. I'm going to make those lazy partying friends of mine co-hosts of mine, come up with a different... come up with an idea of their own and execute it. I may have a dog-sitting job, I'm not positive. So, anyway, like I say, thank you all for listening. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it wasn't too boring, rambling, or otherwise, out there for you. And here we go, Pentatonics. Hallelujah.
I've heard there was a secret chord that David played and it pleased the Lord. But you don't really care for music, do you? Well, it goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah. Hallelujah, 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 hallelujah. Well, your faith was strong, but you needed proof. You saw her bathing on the roof, her beauty in the moonlight overthrew you. She tied you to the kitchen chair, she broke your throne and she cut your hair, and from your lips she drew the hallelujah,
Oh, baby, I've been here before. I've seen this room and I've walked this floor. I used to live alone before I knew you. And I've seen your flag on the marble arch. And love is not a victory march. It's a cold and it's a broken hallelujah. 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 Maybe there's a God above, but all I've ever learned from love was how to shoot somebody who outdrew you. And it's not a cry that you hear tonight. It's not somebody who's seen the light. It's a chord and it's a broken hallelujah. Hallelujah.
where you think you'd find it. Prepare yourself for a reckoning, for when your world seems to crumble again. Don't be afraid, don't turn away. You're the one who can redefine it. Don't let hope become a memory. Let the shadow permeate your mind and reveal the thoughts that were tucked away, so that the door can be opened again. Within your darkest memories lies the answer if you dare to find it. Don't let hope become a memory. When you think of this forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light. Sick on ding, weak on ding, don't let another somber pariah consume your soul. You need strengthening, toughening. It takes a minute off to rekindle the fire burning in the air. Ignite the fire within you. When you think of this forsaken, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light. Don't ignore, listen to me now. You need never feel broken again. Sometimes darkness can show you the light.
Alright, that was Disturbed with the Light. And now I'll play the one that I actually meant to queue up, which is Disturbed's The Sound of Silence. Everybody have a great New Year's Eve, safe. Keep yourself safe. Call me for a ride if you need it. Anyway, The Sound of Silence.
Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its scenes while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains within the sound of silence. In restless dreams I walked alone, narrow streets of cobblestone, neath the halo of a street lamp. I turned my collar to the cold and damp, when my eyes were stabbed by the flash of a neon light that split the night and touched the sound of silence. And in the naked light I saw 10,000 people, maybe